Welcome to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. You will hear from industry leaders covering innovative, cutting-edge business, learning, and HR topics that weave current market research and technology into each episode. Our Excellence at Work podcast is hosted by Brandon Hall Group's Chief Operating Officer and Principal HCM Analyst, Rachel Cook.
Hi, and thank you for tuning in to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. Today, we're going to be talking about the modern era of blended learning, guidelines for upskilling. This is a follow-up from a discussion from a webinar that we had collaborated with between Brandon Hall Group and Meridian Knowledge Solutions just recently. And with us today, joining me in our discussion, I'd like to welcome Nancy Dietz, the Senior Manager of Training and Development for Meridian Knowledge Solutions. Hi, Nancy. Welcome. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Rachel.
Fantastic. And just to share with our audience today a little bit about your background. You've been in the learning and development space for over 15 years. Nancy has extensive experience and background in the adult education learning space that spans across Director of Education Services, LMS and ATS Administrator, Training Consultant, and Manager of Training and Development. And so I'm excited to hear from Nancy or gain her perspective and share with everyone about the topic today. You know, it's a topic that we've had a lot of conversations on, done a lot of research, especially as technology continues to evolve. So do the needs of the skills of our employees and of people so that they can better perform and advance in companies and help companies grow and innovate with everything changing so fast from the market needs, the demands, technology. It's just an interesting time. And of course, technology and Meridian are certainly leading the way with many of their client organizations. They work with companies like the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Johnson Controls, Abbott, Mazda, the Auto Club Group, and many other great iconic companies. And let's take a dive right now into the topic, Nancy. And I'd love to hear from you about what do you think about, or how do we help build and help develop people and reskill them based on where we're headed and how companies are evolving at the fast pace that they are.
Well, one of the things that I think are really important to think about right now out there in the industry in general is that we have to upskill and reskill. And right now those words are used so interchangeably with one another. But I think there's a recognition of what the differences are between them, that we want to upskill those that we may already have in-house, and we want to move them from a junior position maybe to a more senior position in that process. Or do we need to that reskilling and the upskilling is moving them from the junior to the more senior, and then the reskilling might be is that their department is going away, or we have a new product, or have an acquisition that's coming in, and now we need to provide them some additional skills in order to be able to perform successfully. And I think with the changing pace in the industry right now, as we're watching as businesses grow and some of them are contracting, that we really need to be able to focus on that, as well as both internally and externally. A lot of our clients, their process is to provide that type of education for individuals that are not employees. So it's their own client base that they're doing it for.
Absolutely. And also just I've wanted to recognize Meridian for receiving a Brandon Hall Group Excellence Award in 2021. So congratulations. And you have some really interesting stories with your clients on the work that you are engaging them with and helping them through your technology foster or enable these activities. So how, or can you share an example of a specific example of some of the successes that you're having?
So a few of them, one of them that we received that our client received the Brandon Hall Award with is Johnson Controls. So for their particular instance, they are trying to provide skill sets to people outside of their organization. So in their case, it's individuals all over the world that are needing that type of skill set. So as they start off domestically here, US based, and they've begun rolling out this type of education throughout the globe. So anybody that may need to have any type of equipment and be certified on how to provide that repair, they're being able to provide that. And we do the same thing with others that may do it inside, or it may be others. We have one that provides supports individuals that are employees of theirs globally. So they're in third world countries. They're in South Africa. They're in Ethiopia. And these individuals need to be able to receive types of training outside of that traditional office environment. So they're not sitting in an office at a computer. They're out in the field. So they have their phone in hand or a tablet in hand. So how do we expand out and to be able to support those individuals right where they are?
Sure. And it's kind of moving from that formal environment into the informal environment or more on the job, and helping them meet them where they are with the learning that they require to be able to be proficient in what they're doing. And so we talk about, or, um, you know, kind of moving towards this informal or more blended approach to learning. What are some of the modalities or some of the examples that you are finding to be helpful right now?
So some of the ones that I found helpful is the idea of engaging the subject matter experts. So we have such resources inside our organizations that we can share that knowledge from them from peer to peer, but we have this tendency to think that maybe it needs to be in some type of a synchronous environment. We have to have them on a call together, and that's when we facilitate a conversation with them. When in reality, we could possibly be doing an asynchronous. We could be doing a question of the week and allow individuals that came out of a more formalized type of cohort to have gone back to their environments and then answer to that question of the week. What are their challenges? What have they saw as their successes to share with one another? I have one client whose primary issue out there is about disaster preparedness. And so they go in and they've done a little bit of learning ahead of time to learn about what are the roles and things like that. And then they come in and they do role play. They do a simulation of a disaster and how does that structure look like while they're in there. And then they finish with the one simulation, everyone rotates and takes another role. And then they do it again. So they have that practice. But afterwards, these individuals go out and they're in disasters. Well, they have after action reports. Well, that's where you know what went well, what didn't go well, what should they have anticipated. Those types of things can also be shared in that very asynchronous environment. So put them into an LMS in an area that's reference material. Now, the next time somebody's out and they're in the field, they're able to say, "Oh, I remember that article," or "I remember that point," and on their phone they can call up that information. It becomes on demand at the moment that they need it.
Really helps them with their performance. And, it's not just training for the sake of training, but it's relevant training and to help them build their skills to perform better. So
Absolutely.
it's critical. And what else do you, what are some of the things that you think companies or employees are challenged with most now?
I think right now the challenge is this new work environment that we're in. This environment where we initially were in the office, then we were all sent home and we all worked from our kitchen tables for a period of time, and we shared it with our entire family. And then this environment where we can come back, but some people said, actually, I kind of liked being at home, so now they're at home. And so how do I go from that world in which we brought everyone into the classroom? And then when everyone went home, we just put everybody onto Zoom. And then now we have this mixture where we have some that can come and some that can't. How do we handle that that type of training and development of individuals when they're no longer easily accessible? That quick, let me walk down the hall and talk to someone. Well, what are the other resources we have? We have those virtual platforms, but then we can start taking a look at that best practices. How do we share that with one another those that are out in the field. How do they go out that are in the field, and how do I handle something? Well, record it. Everyone walks around with that phone in their hand that's glued to them. Well, it has a really great recorder on it. So record something out in the field. I'm thinking back to the disaster preparedness. We have somebody out in the field, and they're watching something that's doing fabulous. Record it, share it with someone else. I think of those teachers that K through 12, all of a sudden on a Friday was one thing, and on Monday they're trying to manage a classroom full of kindergartners and first graders. One of our clients, those are their clients. They go in, they help to provide that type of education to these K through 12 instructors. And then you have others within their own environment that do just that. Find the best practice person, record them, share that with one another. And we have this tendency to think that it has to be a 45-minute event. It doesn't. Even if we did do an interview with somebody for 45 minutes, break it down,
Right.
make them little snippets, break it into that micro learning so that it can be consumed when they need it.
Right. And that requires proper tagging and the hashtags or the appropriate being able to segment it. So that also requires a little bit more organization of the content and management of the content, but it's definitely doable. And, it just, again, that opens up opportunities to leverage the content more or optimize it more effectively.
It does. It changes the focus of how we design
Mhm.
and how we turn around and be able to push that out and make it available to our audience. Before, where we might be designing some type of a handout, now instead we're designing how do we take that content that I have and break it up so that it's easily consumable and it's on demand for them.
Right. Because even if you did develop something that was an hour long, most likely the person that is receiving it or viewing it or reading it, whatever it might be, listening to it, they're only going to probably perceive about 10% of it, if even, and the likelihood of remembering that is even less. So, and what's going to stick with them is really what they find that's going to be valuable or what they need. And so again, looking at how you design does require kind of a different mindset of learning and training.
It does. It's a taking that information and then putting it in such a manner that the individuals can locate it quickly. That's a real key is there. And then trying to decide, is this piece of information that makes sense for us to keep as a learning item, or is this something that we should turn into some type of a performance support tool? Does this make
Mhm.
sense for them? Okay, I've given you information about it. I had one client one time where we're trying to teach them about empathetic conversations. And here's the list of 5 questions to really kind of keep and help spur into that type of conversation. Well, then at the moment, just before they go in, this particular happened to be a bedside nurse. Before they went into that patient room, they were able to call up what that checklist was and just kind of look at what those items are and just spurred back in their mind what that information, and then it was a recall then of what they had done earlier, whether that was in classroom or through an online learning. I'm able to now recall, oh, I remember what this question should be about. And then they can go in and then carry on that conversation. But it's that opportunity to support them without having to memorize the questions.
Right. And that's very helpful, obviously, because there's so much that everybody does nowadays in their jobs, and no one has just a particular lane that they stay in. They're multitasking, and they have shared responsibilities, shared departments. So it really kind of varies, depends on the complexity of the work and the industry that they're in. But even I don't think anyone is without multiple duties at this, kind of where we are.
Yes, we tend to try and do more with less.
Mhm.
So the opportunity to, you can only put so much into the brain at a certain amount of time. So it's really important in that design process to also help build in what are going to be those recall methods for them. As that information is out there and at the moment they need it, how are we going to help them recall it? As As adult learners, we like to take all that information and, scaffold it into what we already know. So we want to hook it onto something so that it makes it that much easier to bring it up at the moment of use and application.
Right. And I, just curious too, your thoughts on the automation piece and how, because we have all of these different disparate modalities or channels that we offer learning. How do we manage it, or how do we um, measure it? The best that we can.
Well, I think when we start looking at the automation piece of it, I think it's important to see where you could put all of this information, centralize it. I mean, in our average everyday lives, we know that if we want information, we Google it. We want to learn how to fix the kitchen sink, we go and we look at YouTube. Where is that centralized place for us in our organizations? I'm biased. I happen to think that the LMS is a great spot to put all of that type of organization information in
Mm-hmm.
and use all of the automations that's built into them. So many of them have, there's a lot of tools within them. We can help guide them in this learner journey, but it doesn't have to be a formalized one. It can be. We could say, here's your reminder, you're coming to class on Monday. Great. But I'm also thinking about those leadership building that we're trying to do with people. We take them and we may turn around and say, at the end of the course, instead of giving that typical end of course type of survey questions, give them the more reflective ones where we ask them, okay, based on what you've learned, what are 3 areas or scenarios or situations where you're going to apply this? Let them start thinking ahead of time of how they're bringing it back. And then once they do get back, use the automation of your systems to, in 30 days, 60 days, send something out and say, okay, now it's been 30 days. You had identified a few situations. Now let's answer about how did it work out? What were your challenges? What were your successes? And when they feed back that in, we can take that and hand it over to a coach. And now they can have coaching sessions. And those coaching sessions can be one on one. Those coaching sessions could be with a cohort where they now share that peer to peer learning at the same time. And then maybe even the coach is able to say, hey, based on what I'm learning and seeing in here, I'm going to make a recommendation of doing shadowing, job rotation for you. I think this is a great time. You're at a point, you're ready to do an expanded type of assignment. So all of that can be done utilizing something to keep that journey moving forward.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and I think that we have so much great technology, such as your platform, and the key is to ensuring that your strategy and your process aligns with what your goals are, and then using the technology to help you um, be able to maneuver and navigate and distribute, great insights and performance support tools and content.
Absolutely. That goes back to that after action report I was talking about with the disaster preparedness, as those can be shared in some place like a catalog within, your centralized spot. So again, it's a place that you go to locate information.
Right, absolutely. And before we wrap up today, Nancy, is there anything else that you'd like to share, or kind of provide us some updates on what's happening next with Meridian?
Well, I think as we look forward, some of the other ideas of how to do some of this type of upskilling and reskilling is to look at what you can do within the LMS. We're looking at adding more features for gamification to engage those individuals coming in. Looking at how do we integrate more with some content providers out there so we can bring all of those resources into that one spot for you and be able to do that. So I think as we move forward, we're looking at what each of our clients needs in their environment to support their individuals and their expanded audiences.
Very cool with gamification, and partnerships are key in this space to secure strategic partnerships to kind of help just kind of integrate the systems and needs so that the end user has a better experience and being able to have access with full spectrum of solutions. And we all know that each provider has their specialties. And so, I think you're very good at partnering with those that are around you to kind of create more of a holistic offering to your clients.
Absolutely.
All right, Nancy. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me and for sharing your expertise and around this interesting conversation. So it's been lovely having you with me today, and I wish you a great week ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. You have a good rest of your week.